Great, thank you for adding those connections. So really understanding that the lens of a new coach and with Essential Coaching Practice 3, how strong and important that rapport building is. And so really being able to use the coaching stances and our language to build that rapport is important. The activities that we're going to engage in today really are leaning in a little bit more to literacy coaching series and those coaching stances. We'd like to familiarize ourselves with this professional learning source, knowing that as first-year coaches, we really are digging in deeper and learning and engaging more in growing ourselves as coaches and looking at how does this resource connect with the essential coaching practices. And we will engage in learning today through reading about different coaching stances. We will watch a video and really see that carried out in practice. That's one thing Dr. Lallier mentioned, really shadowing other coaches or watching recordings of coaching conversations is helpful in enhancing our practice. And then we will be able to take some time to really dig in and discuss with our colleagues what we saw and how those practices were carried out. So before we move into learning a little bit more about the coaching stances, on a scale of 1 to 3 in the chat, please indicate your familiarity with the coaching stances. 1 being, this is brand new to me. 2 being, I've heard about coaching stances, but I haven't learned deeply around them. And 3, I've learned about the 3 coaching stances from literacy coaching series in the past. So hopefully this is going to support either your learning and utilizing the stances or allow you an opportunity to practice and dig deeper into each of the stances and how you are able to support conversations with teachers that you are coaching. So we're going to dig right in and take a look at the literacy coaching series, and we're going to do a little bit of wayfinding here. At the beginning of the kickoff, shortly after that, Liberty had emailed new coaches within our network an email outlining various resources and how to access and log into those different platforms and components. And within that email, she provided a detailed direction for accessing the literacy coaching series digitally. And that ends up looking something like this once you download it in your unzipped folder. So each of these folders really opens up into materials and then also a video folder. So we are going to dive into the Read Me First component. And in your resources folder, you will have resource 1, and we're going to take a look at that together. So I will either, you can either follow along as I share on the screen, or you might prefer to open it up on your own and browse as we look at resource 1 together. So here is resource 1 document. And we'll do a little bit of wayfinding. This really is just setting up the structure and the framework for all of the documents you will see in that zip folder that we talked about. We got a glimpse of the various folders and each of the different topics, but we are right here in that Read Me First. And so within that, it will bring up this resource here. As I mentioned, there is the materials folder, but then also a separate video menu folder. And as you engage in each of the different learning sessions, you'll utilize the materials alongside of the video there. So in the video menu, it will pop up a resource where you will just click the hot link. You were provided a password with your LCS file, and that should allow you access to view the videos. each of the different learning sessions within this resource. We are going to do the first one together. There are 5 of them. So we will together engage in the focus on data analysis. There's also a session around long-term planning. The 3rd session is reflecting. The 4th session looks at the coach as a model and as a co-planner together. And the last session is the coach as a co-teacher. So thinking about as you may begin to engage in coaching cycles and digging a little bit deeper into what this might look like or what resources and language could I use, this is where it all comes in handy and how it has been so wonderfully laid out for you to engage in a self-study practice. As we continue in this document, you will see kind of like a facilitation guide. So it teases out each session what you will need to have printed off to engage in that learning together or on your own. And then what different components of the videos from the video folder you will want to watch and in what order. And I just wanted to pause for a moment here to say that please, if you have any questions, to drop them in the chat or feel free to unmute and let me know. This is just going to be an open session to work together through our learning. Okay.
Okay, Leslie,
Yeah.
I'm not sure where do we get this zip file? Like, was that something we were supposed to do prior to being here? I guess I don't know where the zip file is.
That should have been emailed to you by Liberty, and I can also, Amanda, since you are within my county, I will be able to share that with you. So through that, Liberty provides an access ID and also a PIN number that I think is specific to each individual user. Because these documents are copyrighted, we want to really honor Dr. Lallier's work. So that is why there's some really, I guess, set parameters on access. So we will work with Liberty to have you updated on that and access to that. Thank you. So for a moment, please find resource 2 that's in the linked documents that Liberty has put in the chat. And it will be an overview of coaching stances. And I can also share that in my screen as we preview it. Is that showing up all right for everyone? So Susan had talked about the 3 stances a little bit in the new coach kickoff. And really what we want to do is consider when we might be using these different stances. The facilitating stance is really when the coach asks general questions about data or instructional moves. It encourages the teacher to really verbalize what they're seeing and doing within their classroom and what those intentional moves mean for their students in learning, and also what they might consider then as they continue planning future instruction. So as we go across that row, the teacher is really providing more of the information, and the teacher is doing that self-talk out loud, that metacognitive thinking in what they are using that's effective within their instruction. So the coach is really in the facilitating stance there. In the collaborating stance, the coach and the teacher are examining data together. Each share their conclusions and what those conclusions might indicate for future instruction. And they are more in a collaborative stance where they may begin to co-plan and work together to develop ideas to improve instruction or student learning. And the final stance is the consulting stance, where a teacher just might not know. The coach may draw on conclusions or make suggestions based on their observations. And they can point out specific things that led to those conclusions and make suggestions for the teacher. And really, as we look at that consulting stance, the coach is the one providing more of the information and taking the lead on the problem solving there. Take a moment to preview that and consider times that you may shift the stance in a conversation, or when you may be more in one stance versus another within your coaching. So we will, oops, I'm sorry. I'm just noticing my screen share is paused. I'm gonna just reconnect here for a moment. Are there any questions or considerations for the stances, what you may have learned previously in the kickoff, any fine details or things that within this document kind of help enhance your understanding of the 3 different stances?
I have a question.
Yeah.
When I collect data about my coaching throughout the days, one of the questions I need to answer is with whatever I logged, if I was logged as the consultant, collaborator, or facilitator. And I was kind of struggling when I was modeling a lesson. Would that be considered collaborator?
That's a great question, because so many times we change stances throughout any one given coaching activity.
Okay.
And when you think about that modeling piece, were you engaging the teacher in the planning of that model lesson? And that is more of the collaborative stance then in that lens. I connect the 3 stances to the CBAM model, the stair step model that Susan had talked about previously too, and thinking, where is our teacher in their understanding of whatever content you may be coaching around, or the instructional practice that you're coaching around. And so really considering if they are learning and they need to enhance that information on their own, that may be more of the consultant piece. But as you are co-planning and collaborating and kind of digging in and leaning into each other's strengths, then that would be the collaboration component. Yeah, so just kind of cross-referencing both the stances and the CBAM stairway and seeing, okay, where is this person aligned right now and how might I record that? It would be a good suggestion also to check with, I don't know what the structure is of your local context, but your coach coordinator or other coaches within your region, and really kind of calibrate, how are we documenting these so that way they're kind of consistent across various districts or schools. Great question. Thank you, Helena.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so one thing that I believe was a common goal or need through the new coach kickoff was really collecting conversation prompts and language in your coaching toolkit. And so we're going to look at resource 4 right now, which is teaching cues and coaching language. And that's going to kind of set the stage for viewing our video and what we can really tune into and listen for in coaching conversations to cue us into stances. So if you want to either open on your own resource 4 from that shared folder, or you can view along with me here. I'm going to give you a minute to just orient yourself with these examples. And we'll have a moment to lift some ahas, some understanding, or some questions around teacher cues and how we might then respond, or what language we may use within those instances. So we'll take a few minutes just to read on our own, and we will come back shared together. Going to open it up to our group here. What is either affirming or a piece that, you know, from the coaching language, boy, I really liked this. I'm going to lift this. I want to use this. What are you finding useful from this specific resource and examples of coaching language?
Did you want us to just unmute or put it in the chat?
Sure. Go ahead, Carmen.
I just thought, I think I'm on the right track of which one you were talking about, but I like where it said, I have been looking at the data. Could we talk about, or I didn't write it all down specifically, but I like that we refer to the data and it's not, you know, like my personal opinion or not of somebody. Let's just look at the data and see what we can do to help in whatever situation. So maybe the conversation might be, I'm looking at your data on letters and sounds. Could we talk about that? So I like that.
Mm-hmm. And how to really draw it back to the why of we're here for student improvement, and grounding our goal for the coaching cycle within student learning. Thank you. All right. We are going to continue learning then about the stances and seeing them in action, and just the overall feeling of facilitating, collaborating, consulting. We can switch from one stance to another within one conversation, as we lifted before, but really paying attention to the cues that shift the conversation. We talked about that CBAM model, and listening to understand where the teacher may be, and knowing then within ourselves, what stance might I need to use and what language can I use to really create the rapport that we know is so important with the teacher, but then also a sustainable working relationship. As we look at the video, I would like for you to have resource 3. Either you can pull that up with you. I'm going to share my screen and show you resource 3. I know without being able to print this off right away, we have some notes, this will guide us through the video, but then also the conversations that we will have in our breakouts. So just one moment, and I'm going to lift resource 3.
Leslie, you might have to reshare.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
Reshare screen.
Yes, thank you, Liberty. There we go. Okay, so we are going to go through a video with a coach and a teacher, and there are 5 different excerpts that we will want to identify what stance the coach is taking. So this is resource 3 again, within our folder. And on a scrap piece of paper, you might just want to number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then as you hear the language that is lifted here in this document, you could consider what stance the literacy coach is taking. Again, please know that we are providing you grace in not having this document, and there will be an opportunity to discuss with your colleagues in your breakout what they heard and what evidence they of the stance that the coach was taking. So I'm going to show you, this is the video menu document where you can access and link all of the videos. So we are going to go into the coach and teacher meeting here. And again, please, I need to stop my sharing. I apologize. Please lean into what stances you hear the coach use.
let's sit down and talk a little bit about the fluency assessment data that you sent me last week. It looks like you gave the assessment first back in September, and I do remember talking with you then about your students' scores and how they performed on that. And then you gave it again last week. So it looks like about 12 weeks of instructional time in between the two assessments. Does that sound correct?
Yes, that's right. And I've been using the fluency rubric that you gave me in the fall to assess their accuracy, rate, and prosody.
Great. I've had some time to go ahead and look over all your scores here from your students, but I'm curious to hear what you found most interesting about your students' scores.
I feel that overall they're doing well with accuracy and rate. Most of them fell if you look within the 15th percentile or above, so I've been very pleased with that. I did have 4, though, that fell below what I had hoped for. And so overall, though, I've been very pleased with the growth in fluency.
Yes, that's great. And you can see that way back here in September, so many of your students were below that 50th percentile mark, and their accuracy rates weren't anywhere close to where you wanted them to be. So I agree. I think that they've made wonderful progress. What do you think maybe has contributed to some of the growth and the progress that you've seen in your students' fluency rates?
One activity I've been doing is repeated readings of instructional text, and that's where the students just read over and over a passage, and they've really been motivated to keep track of their reading from first read to last read. So I think that's made a difference. And then also we have been doing partner reading at least 3 times a week, and so if one student doesn't know a word, then the partner can help them with that, and I think that's made a big difference in their accuracy levels.
Great. They sound wonderful, and it really looks like those activities are making a difference and helping. Yeah.
And while I am pleased with the accuracy and rate, I do have a concern about the prosody scores because they seem to be lower than what I had hoped for. If you look at the score of 1 through 4, most of my students are getting a 1 or 2, which is still similar to what they had in the fall. And so many of them have not made an improvement in prosody. So I would like to increase their phrasing and their expression, but I'm just not sure of what ideas to use to support my students in that area.
Right. I think you're right to be turning to the issue of prosody right now because your students' accuracy rates are good, their rates of reading are good, and so now we need to look at the issue of prosody, those areas of expression and intonation and phrasing that they can start to increase. You know, as for some ideas, back when I taught 3rd grade, I made sure that I always did a lot of modeling first. And so during my large group read alouds, I would make sure that I read passages with great expression and with natural phrasing so that they had a good model of what expressive reading sounded like. In small group reading work, I would often try to pick out a sentence that was interesting, you know, and just something that really kind of caught their eye. And I would go ahead and model reading it with good expression first, and then I would have my group echo read it back to me. And so in doing that, they were able to hear a good model of expressive reading, and then they were able to also practice it with a small piece of text. So those are a couple of ideas to maybe help with the expressive part of their reading. And for some students, visual phrasing was very helpful. This was used with students who tended to, you know, read with good accuracy at a nice rate, but it just wasn't phrased correctly. They tended to read word by word by word. And so in visual phrasing, we would underline a section of the text that could be read together, something like into the woods. And so that reminder with that underline helped the students remember that those words could be read together and would sound much more natural phrased together like that. You know, we've talked about some different ideas, and perhaps you're already doing some of them in class, but if not, do some of them sound feasible for you?
Well, you know, when I read aloud, I feel that I use good expression, but I have never tried echo reading, and I've never tried, nor have I heard of visual phrasing. So I would be interested to know how those would fit into my teaching style. And then I was at a conference a couple weeks ago, and the presenter talked about an activity called Guess the Emotion. And so I thought this might be a fun way to teach expression, but I wasn't sure if you have seen this used with third grade students before, and if you feel it would be appropriate for my students to use.
I do think it would be appropriate. I have seen it used mainly with fiction texts when the teacher is working on character development or trying to help students understand the emotions that characters are feeling in a story. So I do think it would be very appropriate and very helpful to use with your students. You know, we've talked about a whole bunch of different ideas, and I was wondering how you felt about maybe we'd make a list of some of the strategies that we've talked about, and then you and I can look those over together and decide which ones you would like to try with your students. And it may be that you have different strategies that you want to use with different groups of students based on their needs.
I think that would be great. And I still have concerns about the 4 students with their accuracy and rate, but I'm open to new ideas that you might have to help these students to succeed.
All right. Again, we understand the difficulty it is in having a note-taking guide, but not being able to really utilize it. And we appreciate your flexibility and being able to make some notes and jot quickly. But rest assured, as you go through your breakouts, we'll ask that one of the members please share their screen to display resource 3, which again is each of the different excerpts, some of the language the coach and the teacher used to help guide your conversations and reflecting on the stances used. In your conversations within your breakouts, we are going to ask that you discuss a few of these prompts here that I will share. So, in a short while, we will have Liberty put you into breakout groups and consider sharing the reasons that you labeled each excerpt from the video with a particular stance. Remember, one of you please, or if you have it pulled up on your computer as well, you reference resource 3, and that will help guide you through the different excerpts and stances. But also, after you share those, consider how you might think about the stances and particular language that you could use or prepare to use when having a conversation with a teacher. And then also, we know that reflection is so important in this work as literacy coaches, and to think about how might we be able to take some time to reflect on our use of different stances or conversations that went with the teacher and what attributed to a successful conversation, or what ways might we be able to pay a little bit more attention to the different stances that we used and teacher cues that led us to those stances. So we will have Liberty put the breakout rooms up here shortly. We will have about 15 minutes to, again, go through the excerpts and what you stances you identified there, as well as how might we either reflect on coaching conversations and stances we used within those, or how might we better prepare our conversations with teachers in considering the different stances. Welcome back. We hope that this provided you some time to not only process through different stances and paying attention to teachers' either body language or what they are sharing, so that way you can present the appropriate stance or get, kind of get an understanding of where the teacher is at. But also just to really say, Oh, this language. I'm looking at the chat and seeing that it is so hard as we begin this process of working with teachers to lift not just my practices when I was in the classroom, but changing that language to some of our colleagues have found or students respond best to. So I hope that that time was fruitful for you to not only discuss the different stances, but to recognize it's hard and having conversations can be tricky, but hopefully we can recognize and plan and reflect on conversations so that way we can maximize our time with teachers and what we are able to share and communicate with them. I'm going to ask anyone to either unmute either of the rooms. I know I'm not supposed to cold call, so let's kind of just walk through each of the stances as we think about the coach. First, she asked the teacher to think about how the students progressed and really thinking about that tied to specific instructional moves. But then also the teacher was able to identify the problem of prosody and working through some strategies and a variety of strategies that might be used. So is anyone willing to share with us for excerpt 1 what stance they thought the coach took? And the literacy coach's language was, I'm curious to hear what you found most interesting about your students' scores. What stance did you label that and why?
Our group thought that I was facilitating. She was a facilitator in that stance because she was relying on the teacher's expertise, like digging into or letting the teacher dig into her own knowledge and her own thoughts.
Mhm. Great, thank you, Emily. I'm making the connection to this morning's learning also about really the asset-based stance, and so maybe how as taking that facilitating stance, you could take an opportunity to name. You've really analyzed your students' data and use that to reflect on instructional practices. So really finding ways to weave in that asset-based coaching within a facilitator stance. Yeah, thank you. What about excerpt 2? The literacy coach says, what do you think has contributed to the progress that they've made? Is anyone from room 3 willing to unmute and share what stance they thought that was? As we reference the overview of coaching stances, that's an open-ended question that allows then the teacher to talk and discuss and kind of lift their thinking around, okay, what instructional strategies did I provide? And so who's providing the information during that time of the conversation is really the teacher. So again, that would be the facilitating stance. Excerpt 3. The teacher has the concern of prosody, the literacy coach, and here could be kind of something where you might push back on what the literacy coach may have provided in a response. I modeled fluent reading using good expression and natural phrasing. In small group work, I had students echo read. What stance might that be? And if that doesn't align with what our coaching network has learned in a very good coaching stance, what might be some language that we could use to maybe correct that? Who's willing to share their thoughts on excerpt 3?
I will. Our conversation in our group was that was consulting. And we talked about the language of like saying, well, some of our colleagues have found success with this, or the research supports this, instead of what I did.
Thank you, Alice. Again, just kind of having that mindset of shifting our language and how we share some consultant pieces with teachers, not necessarily positioning ourselves as the literacy coach expert, but we may have some expertise in instructional moves that we could lift, whether we have observed colleagues within that building using those instructional strategies, or your observation of students who respond well to research-based practices, and how we frame that with teachers. Wonderful. Excerpt 4, the literacy coach is responding to the teacher's mention of attending a conference. Have you ever seen it used with third graders? Would it be appropriate for my students? And the coach says, I do think it would be appropriate. I've seen it used mainly with fiction texts when teachers focusing on character emotions. What stance would that be? And how do we know if we look at that overview of coaching stances?
It would be consulting, because the coach is giving the expertise to the teacher.
Yes, thank you. And last but not least, excerpt 5, the coach is asking if we made a list of these strategies, we could look at them together and decide which strategies you'd like to try with your students. And what stance would we call that, and what would be the reason for that stance?
We said collaboration because she might be initiating the list, but then they're going to go together and look at them together back and forth.
Thank you, Emily. Yes, again, looking at how it's the conversation between the two of them together, collaborating. One thing we want to also be mindful of when we look at resource 2 and the overview of each stances, there are some cautions with each of those, and maybe overuse of them, and what that may then imply to teachers and the people with whom you work. And so really just thinking about some of those caveats as well. So we're going to take about 5 minutes now for you just to kind of have some personal reflection time. As we talked at the beginning of our session, thinking about our professional learning goal, and whether you had something around rapport, conversations, essential coaching activities, or whether it was a specific goal around your coaching practice. But we'd like for you to just again have some personal reflection time, whether you have a coaching notebook, a sticky note, or just some place where you can write down how you would incorporate some of these ideas and learning, maybe some of the discussion prompts into your coaching practice in consideration of coaching stances. Really considering what time or what percent of my coaching conversations am I consulting right now, or facilitating, or collaborating? And once you analyze that time, think about how could I generate some questions that might guide my own personal reflection as a coach on the stances I've used. How can I be mindful of that after a conversation? But then also, how might I prepare myself in a conversation and considering different coaching stances, and what questions might I want to use preparing as I go into a conversation. I'm going to put those prompts up. And again, just take 3 or 4 quiet minutes to write a personal reflection on our learning components during this session, and we will call back in about 3 minutes. I'm going to invite you to wrap up your final notes. And is anyone willing to share out what strategies or things they want to carry forward, and being mindful of coaching conversations, considering stances, or strategies for reflecting on conversations?
And I guess I can see where the stanzas would help you kind of start your conversations with the why in mind, like in what I want to get out of the conversation with the staff member. You know, like, do I want to do an inquiry, like, how do you think things are going, and more of a collaborating stance. So I kind of like those as like what I want out of the conversation to steer it. So those were, I thought were nice.
Absolutely. Thank you, Carmen. Also knowing that we can plan and prepare as best as possible with conversations with teachers, but knowing that depending on their context, their day, the moment that you are meeting with them, that totally may need to shift or change, and that we are responsive in that way to those teachers' needs. Wonderful. Thank you. Any other final reflections or considerations as you move forward in coaching conversations and supporting those? Okay. Well, again, thank you. We do have one more special guest here. It was just so beneficial, I think, at the kickoff to have Stacy Spansky join us and to really share her thoughts and processes in being a first-year coach. And now that she is into year 2, she's been able to come and share, and I think it was so reassuring to many of you, the thought of transition and thinking about professional identity and how that has changed and how that really can be influential and impactful in your professional life as well as your personal life. So I'm going to invite Stacy to jump on and say a quick hello, but really we just want to think and hear and learn, since she joined us last, what else she may be thinking about and related to the difference between October in a first-year coach versus October in a second-year coaching role. So please, hello, welcome, Stacy. We appreciate you joining us and giving us a five short minutes of your time, but it has been so beneficial to this new group of coaches. So thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, it's nice to see people. I don't feel like I had the whole gallery of people last time. So to actually put some faces on the screen. Oh my goodness. I'm going to tell you, I probably only have the capacity for 5 minutes of stuff anyway. From last October to this October, and even since September, in 1 month's time since I kind of spoke last time, I just jotted down some ideas and thoughts. And the main thing that I want to tell each one of you, we really talked about like transitioning out of the classroom and allowing yourself to grieve that transition. And for me, it took all year. I'm not really grieving a whole lot right now. So you get to that point because there's so much joy that happens. And my ultimate thing that I wrote down first is you matter. And if you can really establish relationships with teachers and your administrator, you will take off. And in saying that too, I want to remind each one of you to give yourself the grace and space, because as a new coach, and I'm second year only, and I'm feeling this, and I have to check myself often of, I want to meet everybody's needs. And it's that sense of urgency. Like teachers have urgency to help with their students, and ultimately we're only one person. And that's what makes the beauty of working with the team so beneficial. But I'm really right now sensing that sense of urgency. And so I would encourage you, whether you're first year, second year, any year, to really, when teachers come to you and you're that thought partner, and that's what you're kind of talking about when I jumped on, of just like meeting them where they're at and reminding yourself of that as well. Because with everything, with those urgencies that are popping up, I had to remind myself often to just pause, listen, observe, ask the questions, and you don't need to have all the answers. And it's so hard, I know, for me personally, to remind myself of that. But my mind right now is going in so many different ways. And so I know I also touched on this last year of last year. It seems like last year. But last time I spoke of schedules. You're scheduling and blocking out time to plan or prep, even for a conversation, is so important. Just like even getting your questioning down to kind of get your mind thinking about what questions. But ultimately, once you go into a conversation, you really don't know where it will take you either. So, but the more you kind of allow yourself to schedule that time out, because I know, like, being in the classroom, it's very scheduled for us. So it's hard to say, I don't want to, it's not like saying no, but it's hard to say no to things that you could support in that moment when you need time to plan yourself and prep for the work ahead with teachers and students. So I wanted to remind you of that too, because that's actually the land I'm living in right now, with really supporting teachers and going to meetings and getting into classrooms. So the word that kind of surfaced for me was like to protect yourself. And it's so hard when we just want to say yes all the time. And we see that in teachers, we want to help. We're the fixers, right? But that in itself is a mind shift that we have to be comfortable in. And it's okay to pause, because if I'm being completely honest, I'm not even taking it day by day right now. I'm taking it hour by hour. And that's just in the space I'm in. On top of school, I'm also publishing a book, and that is also in my capacity. So for me, that is in my life. For you, it's your family and different things going on, and staying healthy. So just remember to take care of yourself in some aspect as well, because this job, you hold a lot. Like, we're not the therapists, but we're a listening ear, and our teachers trust us when we have that relationship with them. So I think just a huge takeaway from September to October of this year is just to pause within that urgency, listen and observe. And then you can always go back to the conversation, and your teachers know that you're there for them. And I think I'm right on time. I just needed to like tell you all that, because it is a whirlwind, and I know how it is the first year, and buckle up, because it doesn't stop once you get into classrooms. So give yourself that time and space, and to enjoy it. Enjoy this work that we get to do.
Wonderful. Thank you, Stacy. Again, lifting that the grief that we're all feeling right now doesn't last, and reminding ourselves to pause within someone's urgency, for us to take the time to pause and to consider and lean in and to listen, to understand we are, I think, kind of supporting our own capacity to identify where the areas are that need the support. So we appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me again. I love you guys.
As we finish on our time today in the agenda, around the 2:50 to 3 o'clock agenda line item, we would like for you to really reflect on the intentions that you set this morning, as we were in the whole group of our MESA early literacy colleagues, and reflecting on our pursuits, the work that allows us to live into Dr. Muhammad's Cultivating Genius and Unearthing Joy, and really finding ways to consider our learning within those pursuits, But first, I just wanted to say thank you all. You are making a difference for kids. It might not be directly visible like when you were in your own classroom. It might not be immediately measurable every day. It may even take a little time to see the ripple effects of your leadership, but you will never know all of the fruits that grow from your service. All of this acknowledged, rest assured, your influence with teachers is changing the world for kids. You're planting seeds, you're watering, you're holding others up, and you're helping them celebrate their harvest. So thank you. We appreciate the work that you are doing. I'm going to share our network reflections. And within this remaining time, Liberty has provided you the sketch form link, and then also there is a feedback survey link in the chat that she has done. You will not need to stay on any longer than it takes for you to do your reflection and to complete your sketch form if you choose to receive sketches, but we please appreciate and listen to and really act on the feedback that you give us from our learning today throughout the day. So again, thank you for your time, and we appreciate all that you do. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.